the Anker PowerConf C200. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter to keep you up on all the latest from MacVoices. Watch or listen to MacVoices straight from your email client. Sign up at macvoices.com/newsletter and stay up to date. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is a MacVoices briefing on the Anker PowerConf C200 Webcam. All of us are spending more time on video online, whether it be Zoom calls, Teams calls, Skype calls, WebEx calls, GoToWebinar calls, GoToMeeting calls. We are all spending a lot more time staring at a camera and having a camera stare back at us and let other people stare at us as a result. Now, during lockdown, it was acceptable to just use whatever you had, and there wasn't a great premiums put on image quality or even audio quality. As long as people could see and hear you, that was fine. But now we're 2 years later, and it's time to up the game if you want to be taken seriously at all. I recently sat through a call that was absolutely terrible because I don't know what the person was using. I wanted to ask so badly. But the audio was horrendous. The video was almost worse. So I got to thinking about this, and I wanted to bring you a briefing on the Anker PowerConf C200. Now, it's easy to spend a lot of money on webcams, and they all claim to be the best webcam out there with a whole lot of different features and whiz-bang things that will make you look great. But you don't have to spend a fortune to at least up your game to some degree. If you're using a relatively current Macintosh, you're probably doing okay. But if you're not, or if you still want to up your game with a webcam that has some really nice features, you need to look at the Anker PowerConf C200. So let's dig in and find out what this can do. But I do want you to note, right now I am using a DSLR for my webcam, I'm using studio lights, and I'm using a dedicated microphone, the one I use for pretty much all the MacVoices. So I'm going to switch over and also switch locations and switch lighting and switch everything. And so I will be, unless I note otherwise from here on, I will be using the PowerConf C200 as webcam and also as the microphone to give you an idea of what the comparison is. To be fair, it's probably not really proper to compare what you're hearing and seeing now with that, especially because of the lighting. But I want to try to give you as accurate a representation as I can of what this camera can do. So let's dig in. This is the audio and video from the PowerConf C200. You may hear a little bit of rumbling in the background simply because I'm in close proximity to a couple servers on my desk, so that's not a failure. In fact, if anything, that's an indication of how sensitive the PowerConf microphones are. My lighting sources, I've got three. I've got one 27-inch monitor there, one 27-inch monitor over here. This one has a little more white on it. This has some darker images displayed. And then down here, I have the MacBook Pro 16-inch, 2021 16-inch in front of me. Those are the only light sources in the room. I tried to avoid any ambient light sources except for maybe some screensavers that are behind me. Again, trying to do something that's real world. Also, a quick note about the image you're seeing. There is an auto white balance feature in the PowerConf that I have turned on. Ordinarily, the image would probably be just a little more toward the blue side, but it's leveled out a bit by the PowerConf itself. Let's get into some of the basics before we move on. The PowerConf C200 is a small cube-shaped camera that sits on top of your monitor with an adjustable clip that looks like most other webcams on the market. It allows for easy re-angling of the camera based on the height of your monitor. For purposes of this demonstration, I have the PowerConf mounted on top of my MacBook Pro, right beside the built-in camera. The MacBook Pro itself is sitting on a wedge-shaped base, so the rear of it is just a little bit higher, so as a result, the image you're seeing is a desk at normal height with the MacBook Pro open fully, and the PowerConf sitting on top of that, again, raised up just a couple inches. Some of the specifications on the PowerConf include a 2K camera, AI noise canceling stereo mics, and automatic low light correction. Depending on your use case, one of the best features is the integrated analog privacy cover. It is a reddish-orange analog cover that iris is closed to block the camera when not in use, and is controlled by a small slider switch on top of the PowerConf. Located just under the camera is a small white LED that indicates the camera is in use. Between the two, there's no doubt about what status your camera is in, whether the iris is open or closed, and whether the camera is on or off. The PowerConf can be used as a standalone plug-in webcam, but to fully access its features, you need to use the AnkerWork software that comes with it. This is the AnkerWork software that comes with the PowerConf, and this is how you access some of its best features. Let's take a look at all of them, and I'm going to leave the camera on live so you can see some of the differences as we go through those features. First is the resolution. Now you can change the resolution of the PowerConf. It doesn't seem to show up a whole lot here, but it may make a big difference when you are using it for video conferences. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to click each one. There's a slight pause as the camera adjusts and everything comes back into focus, and the audio may cut out briefly. So first is, obviously, as I'm clicking, 360p. Next up is 720p. And you may start to notice some differences here. Then we go to 1080p, which is the resolution of most of the webcams in most of your current Macintoshes. So that's what 1080p looks like on the PowerConf. And finally, we're going to go to the full 2K. Now again, on this recording you may not appreciate the difference, but it definitely makes a difference when you're using it. You can also change the field of view, and this is one of the best things about the PowerConf. Now as you can see, I have it on this setting, and it has cut my head off. If I pull back just a little bit, I've achieved something a little bit closer to what you might find with a normal MacBook webcam, or pull back, and you see a whole lot of my room and a whole lot less of me, at least up close, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So let's go back to the middle setting and then go back to the angle of adjustment. And as you can see, using these controls, I can put myself back in the center of the frame. So it does allow you to do some adjustments. And obviously, as you can also see, you're not limited to just those three settings. You can adjust the zooms as you wish. So if you really want to be up close and personal, you can do that, or pull the whole way back and get the maximum view range of the PowerConf. There is an anti-flicker in case you are in an environment where there are fluorescent lights. That's something you would definitely want to turn on at that point. Now, I think it's important to note, I have not made any adjustments other than the ones you've just seen to the coloration of the PowerConf. The room here is relatively dark. I've indicated what my light sources are, but take a good look around and you can see how well the PowerConf handles low lighting. I'm not going to mess with the brightness or anything because I would prefer to keep this as is. But again, as you can see, you can do some tweaks, maybe make the colors a little richer, change the saturation, change the brightness to your settings and to suit you. There's an auto white balance. I do have that turned on. It comes turned on by default. And again, that's probably taking a little bit of the bluish tint out of the video coming, or the light, excuse me, coming from the monitors. It also has a horizontal flip, so if you want to flip yourself horizontally, you can do that. So you can either make your t-shirts readable or unreadable as you wish. Next up is the microphone setting. You can do omnidirectional, which would be 180 degrees. You also can have 90-degree directional, which is the way I've had it set since the beginning, because I'd prefer not to have you hearing some of that hum coming off of the servers. I'd rather hear you hearing me. It can make a big difference, especially if you do have some ambient noise in the background coming from anywhere but directly behind you. The last setting is a little bit of a sales thing for Anker. You pick the kind of environment you are in, and it makes suggestions for not just which Anker webcam is best, but also some of their other products as well. It's fun to play with. You can take a look at it, and if one of those products solves a problem you have, great. And if you already have something that solves that issue, or you don't have the issue, that's fine too. But everything on this really makes a whole lot of sense. The controls are simple, but they're very functional. And as you can tell, they absolutely are essential if you want to change the look of your webcam for your circumstances. I probably should have said this earlier, but I'm sitting at a normal height desk with the MacBook Pro positioned as described, and I'm probably about 18 inches, 20 inches away from the camera. So it can make a big difference in what you're using now. I would like to compare it though to the MacBook Pro camera that you may be using. So I'm going to switch over to both the MacBook Pro camera and mics and let you get a sense of the difference. So now I've switched back from the Anker over to the native MacBook Pro audio and video. I've not changed positions. I haven't angled the screen any differently, so you can see that right now my head is being cut off. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to tilt this back a little bit so I look a little more where I should be. You'll notice that the light handling is maybe not quite as good. You can't quite see into the darkness behind me as well as with the Anker. And of course, there are no settings for the built-in camera unless you're using a third-party application like webcam settings. To be fair, you can achieve some of those results, and you can definitely improve this picture using webcam settings, but it also means that you are involving a third party, and you may not be just getting the full resolution and the full experience. And again, speaking of resolution, again, this is a 1080p camera on the MacBook Pro. The PowerConf is a 2K camera. Now we're back on the PowerConf. And so you now have a little bit of a comparison between what the MacBook Pro would be like versus the PowerConf, both in audio and video. I should mention too, I'm not going to do the normal tweaking of the audio except for the intro part when we were on my regular setup. I'm going to leave the rest of the audio pretty much as is, with the exception of trying to just level out so you're not getting blasted by one or anything is too quiet on the other. So I'm going to leave that largely unprocessed. A couple final things on the PowerConf. There is a 1/4-20 threaded screw hole so that you can mount this on a tripod if you want, a little mini tripod for your desk, or a larger tripod if you were using it for some other purpose. The price on this though is $59.99, and that's where this makes such a big difference, because now instead of spending those $200, $300, $400 that you're seeing on some of the higher end webcams right now, you can spend $60 and improve your webcam probably from what you're using. If you're satisfied with what you're using and you had no complaints from the folks on the other end, that's great. But if you want to up your game, the PowerConf is a great place to start. $59.99 on Amazon. That's a MacVoices briefing on the PowerConf C200 webcam from Anker. I hope you found it useful. I'm Chuck Joyner. I'll be back with more soon. Until then, thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.